Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's Mashreq Sustainability Dialogues Webinar, where we take a deeper dive into this massive push towards sustainability. Of course, during the COP28 conference that's ongoing with a lot of updates that are occurring, trying to uncover some insights and intelligence to help our stakeholders navigate the road ahead. We're lucky to be joined here today with our hosts from Mashreq, Radu Topiklianu, who's the Executive Vice President and Head of Neo and Personal Banking at Mashreq. And of course, our special guest speakers, Carl Madlan, who is the Vice President of Inclusive Impact and Sustainability, Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Visa, and Samira Fernandez, who is the Director of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Century Financial. We're tackling a very critical topic today, which of course has a lot of moving elements, which is comprehensive financial education. What initiatives are necessary to promote financial literacy and create a more sustainable and equitable future? Radu, I just wanted to first kick off with you as host to get your opening comments on the overall critical question that we're tackling and kind of what the pathway ahead is.
Yeah. Thank you for welcoming me, and I would like to welcome all our guests here today. It's a pleasure to discuss about this topic, a topic which is very dear to Mashreq and to me personally. I have a daughter; she's 14, so financial education is very important for me, very on a very personal level. And I think it's a topic which is very relevant, especially these days. I've been also in one of the panels in COP28, and this was one of the topics to discuss about how we are making sure that young generation is educated and they understand how to be financially responsible. And it's a topic on which there is a lot of conversation which is happening. There is a lot of conversation which is facilitated by various parties, Mashreq being one of them. And I'm really looking forward for the conversation today.
Thank you, Radu. Samira, I just wanted to kick off with you as well for your opening comments on the overall question. It's a big concept. It's a big question. What are your thoughts, of course, absorbing what's been happening at COP28, and what do you think is the pathway forward?
Thanks, Brian. First of all, I think, when the COP presidency spoke about being an action COP, we can see the Mashreq Sustainability Dialogues also taking it into action. And that is a beautiful synergy that we can see today, to see that it's not just dialogue, but it is also about actionable results. And we can see statements being made, realistic purposes, being put into practice, exchange of dialogue to show what works in one place may or may not work in the other. So I think with that spirit in mind, we're here to take it forward.
In terms of action, I just wanted to ask a follow-up, because that's kind of the hardest part, right, is implementation. Of course, this is the first global stock take. There's been a lot of announcements. But after COP28, that's kind of when the real work also starts to follow through for this. What is your recommendation, of course, when we talk about financial literacy and turning the dial, on the first steps that really need to be taken to create that action and move things forward?
So I think that's a great question, and we did put things into action. So I'm delighted to mention and announce that we at Century Financial, have partnered with the PRME, which is the United Nations Principles for Responsible Management in Education, as well as the University of Dubai. It was just a few days back at COP28, we released our first publication, which is Financial Literacy for All, a program for blue-collar workers and empowering them towards financial literacy. So to be honest with you, Brian, we really took this on a serious note, and we have taken our first step with the United Nations SDGs to partner and collaborate with education and industry towards community welfare.
Carl, I want to bring you in as well to get your opening thoughts and comments on this. Of course, you manage a massive region, essentially. What is your perspectives? What are your opening thoughts?
Thank you, Brian. The key part linked to COP is about the next generation, and how do we ensure that the next generation has the tools, has the capabilities and the skills to actually be part of a digital economy, be part of a world that is actually more sustainable than where we are today. And I'll pick on Radu's point, where I have two children that are a little bit younger than his daughter, and it's a responsibility of the parents, of the guardians, to ensure that those skills are imparted. So they, of course, the responsibility of the schools, but the curriculum in most countries do not include financial education. And if it's not there, it means that somebody has to fill that gap. So really, this conversation around sustainability is also about sustainability of individuals and communities in the environment, but in the ability to transact and be part of that environment.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up.
Sorry, I just want to build on what Carl mentioned, because it's important to have this this conversation, but it's usually a difficult conversation. Parents are not feeling at ease to talk with their kids about money. And again, I'm building on my personal example. It's difficult to have a wider conversation about money beyond that I need money. Yeah. So I think this is our role, to bring this conversation between parents and kids and to facilitate this conversation and to provide the means for this conversation to become real. And I'm not going to advertise, but for example, what we are doing in Mashreq, in NeoNext, that's a special design platform for youngsters starting with 8 years old to open an account under the control of the parents. The parents have full control, full visibility to make things that to make sure that things are secure and everything is fine. But kids can start to design their own goals, saving goals towards a certain specific objective. They start to develop patterns of spending and saving. They start to understand how to use a card, and soon we are going to put also some financial education there. So I think this is one way to take the things into real action from the top.
Well, Carl, I just wanted to ask you a follow-up question that ties into that, and I think would be helpful for personal development within financial literacy, and of course with education. We keep talking about these big terms. Sustainability as a definition keeps evolving. What is your definition exactly of financial literacy and how that ties into sustainability, which could kind of uncover more insights to help our stakeholders navigate that road ahead?
It's a very good point, and it has to be simple, in simple language. And sustainability is really about your ability to be around for a longer period of time, to be around in conditions that allow you to breathe, to be healthy, and to be able to contribute to the economy. If I go back to Radu's point about the parents and the children, and some children unfortunately do not have parents, but they are communities that are assisting them. It's how do you ensure that as a parent who's building some form of capital, you are teaching your children that this capital can only continue to sustain them if they understand how it was created, how it's been managed, and what is the responsibility. So simple example, every weekend there is some form of a party that kids have to go to, or birthday party. We used to have a responsibility of going to get the gifts. We introduced a similar solution to what Radu was talking about. Each child has a card. When they go to the shop, they actually start to look at prices, and they start to make decisions in terms of how much money do I have on my account, how many birthdays do I have to go for the rest of the year, and can I be able to afford all these gifts? It has changed the conversation, because before they'll go and pick, but now they have to think about what it is. So if you think about sustainability, it's creating that awareness early on in the life of a young person, that every decision has consequences. So if you think about the environment, do I continue to use plastic bottles? Do I continue to buy clothes, or can I get secondhand clothes? All these decisions at an individual level has consequences for the community, the family, but also for the nation.
Samira, I just wanted to bring you back in as well. I think a good point on education was mentioned too. I remember in my times at university, actually all throughout high school, I don't remember having a financial literacy kind of aspect embedded into curriculum. From your perspective, Samira, how do you think that we can work closer together with academia as industry in order to help build out that program and embed it within the culture of education? What do you think some specific recommendations would be best to implement moving forward in order to do so?
So I think a revision of the current academic curriculum, right from the early years, the early stages, the primary school, talking about the basics of saving, basics of money, and also integrating sustainability in that. While we look at, reuse, reduce, let's also look at refuse. And how can we teach our younger generation that by saying no to, certain basic necessities and having a very minimalistic lifestyle is normal? In this part of the Middle East, where we are, so used to a very luxurious, highly privileged way of life, let's look at developing, underdeveloping countries where even water right now is still, in a dire shortage. And when we can teach different elements of reusing, refusing, and how to maximize this, ingraining this in the curriculum along with financial knowledge at the early years, early stages makes a big difference. I also want to bring into this topic and this panel that it's not just financial literacy for the youth. Financial literacy for working women, women entrepreneurs, a stage where women otherwise had their partners, their husbands, the men in the house making decisions. But now with the world changing, we're looking at more women empowerment and the government empowering women entrepreneurs as well. I think that is another aspect where we need to inculcate more financial literacy so that even women can go back into their homes and guide and have these discussions with their partners saying, let's look at these forms of investment. Let us look at these avenues of saving. So that's where the dialogue can change as well. At Century Financial, we look at various elements because we are in the investment services industry. So we even look at, as I mentioned, blue collar workers, although it is only a social responsibility initiative that we do. We look at how we can empower these blue collar workers to look at saving and not spending on other means such as lottery, for example, which is a social evil where people do not save but spend a big amount, so much so sometimes they even take credit just to buy a ticket. And when we went to most of the labor camps, this is what we found. So we are teaching them the power of compounding and how they can save and make it better.
I think just as a follow-up question, Samira, I think Carl mentioned a good point is keep communication simple in a sense. And of course that by doing that, it helps empower all the demographics that we're looking at, youth, women, blue collar workers. What's your advice in order to keep that communication simple, to explain the ideas that leads to implementation and action? We're all in our same segments where we might be in that space every day, and we've worked with sustainability leaders who are in their space every day. But of course, communicating this concept across multiple functions tends to be difficult, where you don't want to lose interest. What's your advice on the best way to communicate messaging in order to implement and reach our ambitions and targets?
I think, communication should be multifaceted, not sticking to just one way. They say if you want to promote something, repeat it at least 21 times. But I think that 21 times can be through, even the power of AI, where you look at, I visited one of the conferences the other day and they looked at AI with art. And that was so beautiful because they had the entire story of a book covered in an animation form. And it kept everyone so engaged to see what's actually happening there. So as you rightly said, communication is the new form, looking at different ways to communicate, different languages to communicate, and also, bringing people together as communities. We always talk about, initiatives by companies and businesses, institutions, but can we look at community-driven initiatives where the community is responsible for saving? We create community funds. So there's a social impact fund created for a community where they look at engaging in a social project. It could be a tree plantation drive, looking at a revenue earner through it or how to save the environment. And even through that, blend it in and integrate it with financial literacy in various forms. So perhaps engagement of all sorts could be the way further.
So, Brian, if I may come in on this one,
Yeah, sure,
I'll add
jump in.
that it has to be also in the community's language. So what we've done,
Yes.
we've made sure that we have colleagues that speak different language, Tagalog, in Hindi, to make sure that when we deliver this session in collaboration with partners, it is delivered in that language so that English doesn't become a barrier to understanding. And we run a program with one of the big companies here in Dubai, where it has now been embedded into the training program for the blue-collar workers. And it's delivered by the company and is part of the curriculum of training the blue-collar workers. Another one that we also often don't think about is people living with a disability or people of determination. So with I Am Inclusive, which is a social enterprise here in the UAE, we've introduced financial education with sign language because it's a huge community that also needs to have, we need to ensure that they have similar access to anyone else in the community. So when we think about access, we shouldn't limit ourselves to those that have, I would say, the full abilities, but ensure that anyone is able to actually have access to financial education.
Carl, I think that leads into the next question I wanted to steer towards you as well, which was, we're talking about parents, we're talking about leaders in community, we're talking about teachers and education. What's your perspective on where we stand in terms of developing the skill sets for the right individuals who will be leading this charge in terms of financial literacy, in terms of duration, teachers, education? How do we ensure that those leaders are educated and are able to kind of move the dial forward in a sense? I imagine it's a big task and challenge to take on.
It's a challenge because our first inclination would be to go towards teachers and educators, but the curriculum is full, if I can put it that way. So the question then becomes, how do we think about embedding some of these elements into some of the classes that already exist? If we're teaching mathematics, can we introduce some element of compounding, as Samira was saying, so that even if it's not a full course, it can be that. An alternative could be, we have electives for sports, but we don't have elective for financial education. So what stops us from having after-school curriculum that introduce financial education? It's a life skill. And sometimes I tell my children that if you're not financially educated, it's like you're actually living with a disability, because that's a language of the world. You need to be able to, it's like mathematics. If you don't understand mathematics, you can't read the world, because every single day you are either adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. Financial education is the same. So we need to think about how do we support teachers and educators to be able to bring this in the classroom, because that's where a lot of children that can go to school actually will spend time. For the children that cannot go to school, in places where they have an opportunity to be, we also need to find a way to bring it to them. And it's something that, unfortunately, many people learn the hard way. And I'll bring a last element on that, which is around cybersecurity. Unfortunately, a lot of people that enter the digital financial services get burnt. And the reaction then will be, you know what, I'm going to just stick to cash. I'll get the card, I'll go to the ATM, withdraw, it's in my hand, it's safer. Maybe not. So what are we doing to ensure that the transition to individuals that are moving to digital financial services is fully secure? And that's part of financial education as well.
And what's your outlook for the digital side of finance and how that interacts with youth and drawing them more into being more financially stable and aware? How is that progressing? What are the platforms that are being created? What do you think is the way forward?
Gamification is one of them. You know, we need to be able to bring financial education in a way that young people, Gen Z, consume information today. So it has to be, you know, people speak about influencer, for example. Maybe it's an influencer that picks up something. If you go, for example, on some of the platform TikToks, in Pakistan, for example, financial education is a big thing. You know, so there are actually a lot of influencers that are creating content to educate young people. What we often don't do is that we're thinking about education in a very classic way. It has to be in the classroom, or it has to be from a teacher or a parent. But, you know, I have at home 2 very young individuals that actually sometimes teach me things because they have seen it somewhere else, and I'm not able to actually. So, and that's keeping that ability to say, where do we find young people today? And how do we create content that is relevant to what we actually would like them to know? This way, they don't see it as extra work, but they see it as a way to actually engage that is much more. Or, can we run a competition with Mashreq, for example, on that ability of creating content around financial education? We give them very raw data of what exists, of a basic of financial education, and then let's have them create something that makes sense to them.
Yeah, I have two nieces who are 8 and 9 years old. I didn't get my first phone until I was 16 when I started driving as an emergency tool, essentially. And now they have a lot of stuff that they're working with, which is way beyond what I was doing at that age. Samira, I just want to get your aspect on that too. Of course, how we can leverage technology and how we can use it to our advantage in order to advance the goal that we're trying to achieve.
Sure, I agree completely with Carl when he talks about gamification. But what I also want to bring into focus, if I may, is, it's the government. How can we look at the government playing a key role in this? We have the regulations in place on the usage of digital devices. But can we look at something that is particularly specified and monitored for the children in a way that parents also do not feel that they are threatened, that the children are exposed to things that they are not looking at? So I think that is one. Secondly, I think the role of the diverse financial markets. We have the stock exchanges with us, the ADX and the DFM, and right now it's all very limited in a very specific manner, where it's only the global markets who have access and investors who are looking at that. But can we get this investor and investment-related strategies, investment-related services and education ingrained to children through digital platforms, maybe through the ADX or DFM and ADGM at an early stage? This could be part of their perhaps a sustainability program towards education in this area. I also want to talk about the growing expat population. If we are looking at the UAE, for example, with diverse nationalities here, some who are exposed to investments and the financial sector and financial services, while others are not. So can we have one, overarching program right from the basics to everyone who comes here, something like an acculturalization workshop, perhaps in the field of finance, where everyone who comes to the UAE says, these are the rules and regulations, but these are some things that you need to know about either the banks or investment opportunities or, financial working groups that we have. Debt management is very, very important in this area. Once again, I feel that, technology has a great role to play in some of the, access to credit. Retirement planning in in a country where I come from, India, is huge, but I think that's something that we need to also see how we can incorporate here in the UAE, so that children from an early age can go and see how they can save, how they can look at their long-term plan, and take care of their future, so that they have, the means to support their future and, empower their own personal goals. And I think if we can do this through gamification and through various digital modes, the government and otherwise, this is going to help us. And finally, if you don't mind me adding, Brian, I think financial scams these days are huge. And I think all of us have been, victims of it in one way or the other, at least through a phone call or, a message. And I think this, when we talk about financial education, and everything is on the digital front. So can we look at, providers looking at giving out this knowledge, even to children at an early age, saying, if you get a link on this, which might not be relevant to a particular formal website or a legal thing, look at it. This kind of awareness is important. And I feel, through digitization, lots can be done.
This requires, of course, partnerships, and action requires that partnership and collaboration in order to implement the roadmap that's been put out, ahead of us, essentially. Samira, what do you think in order to create that ecosystem with stronger partnerships and break down silos between industry, between government, of course, society is another pillar to that chair. What do you think we can do better in order to establish that?
I think let's break barriers. Let's redefine our boundaries. Right now, it's a mindset that we create based on either a gender, income, the countries we come from, who we are, our background, or even the investment criteria. So if we can find a way to normalize and ensure that we keep certain barriers out so that we can just have a wholesome divided framework which talks about a long-term goal. What really is what I really admire is the UAE Vision 2071. And that's what I was telling my children who are 16 and 18. And I was saying, if the UAE government can plan something which is so long term and ensures that it implements it by bringing the best thought leaders, and knowledge management to the UAE, how much more can we do to create a more inclusive society? So I think with that, it's also important to understand some of the habits and behaviors that we have. Let's look at our saving habits, for example. Is there a mechanism that we can put in place, create to the world, to the population out there, saying that let us, spend on this, but a percentage of our savings should go for savings in some or the other form. Now, this is something we don't just need to educate our children with. Surprisingly, it is us as well, starting with myself, to have that system in place saying you spend on this, spend on the basics, but 20%, 15% will be put into saving. And these are the credible schemes that are provided. And finally, I think a diversification of your investment portfolio, I feel, is really important. Let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Let's move them all. And I think if we can keep these basic challenges in place, these are some of my few recommendations that I feel would help us level up, step up, and take financial literacy to a new level.
Carl, I just wanted to bring you in on that too, in terms of partnerships and diving a bit deeper. What are the components that make up an effective partnership across these silos? Of course, you have the private sector, you have some competitive collaboration, you have the government, society. There's a lot of elements, education. What needs to be in kind of the mixing pot in order to make an effective collaborative partnership that helps move things forward?
Brian, I think the first one is to acknowledge that this is not about competition. No, the ecosystem and every single one playing in that ecosystem need to have the skills and understanding how to be part of this game. The second element is to acknowledge what are the core capabilities of each partner. So if I am strong in A, I don't need to be strong in B and C because I can find partners that can be strong in B and C. It's a sum of these different components that will allow us to actually provide the UAE and other markets where we are present the ability to increase that pie. Because the addressable market, and that's really what it's about, how many people can actually leverage on the digital economy? The fewer numbers there are, the challenge it becomes for all these new tools and technologies that we have. But as we create opportunities for people to really be part of the digital economy, then the partnership that is being created actually creates more room for individuals to be part of the digital economy. And that's what it should be about. Financial education should have a purpose. And that purpose is to make sure that anyone that participates in the digital economy speaks the language of the digital economy.
I just want to touch on young people again as well, because of course that's going to be the generation that drives things forward. And we mentioned probably the ones who are leading technology developments as well, not too long in the future. How do you establish buy-in and communication? It seems like climate change is such a massive challenge to tackle, where as a young person, where do you start? How do you get involved? What do you recommend to young people in order to kind of take that empowerment and move forward and take the advantage? You can only create so many programs to help, but of course you also need the other side to buy in as well to be a part of that journey.
So if we look around today, we have seen a number of young people that have become activists in the good sense of the word in the climate space. We've seen this in the fight against HIV/AIDS, for example, many years ago. So what we are realizing is that young people actually understand some of the issues that are affecting them. When I grew up, HIV/AIDS was a massive issue. And I remember growing up with that fear at the beginning of what it could do. Then with education, understanding actually, it's something that you can avoid, and these are the steps to avoid it. When it comes to climate change, and the survey that we did recently shows that there's more awareness. And actually, we asked parents, what do the 8 to 18-year-old think about? And they realize that actually the younger generation is much more aware, because actually this is an existential threat for them. I remember going to my daughter's class, and she was in grade 5, and her knowledge of sustainability and the environment made me quite shy. So it's different. When I was growing up, this was not taught in schools, whereas now it is really part of the curriculum. And we're talking about financial education. So what would it take for financial education to be part of the curriculum? And we see younger people becoming activists on financial education.
There's also a lot more access to information at any second of the day as well, constantly across the internet.
Yes.
Where I think I remember AOL 2.0 coming out, where if you're lucky to have a phone line, you can connect every now and then. It seems that 30 minutes goes by pretty quickly. I just wanted to start wrapping up in terms of closing comments. Samira, to start off with you. COP28, what are you hoping for the outcomes? I think we're just coming to the end of week 1. What are your expectations and what you're looking for to come out of this massive engagement?
I think it's been an interesting discussion that we've just had. And I think what I feel is reverse mentoring is the way of the future. I think we are no more experts in our field. We have to learn from the youth, the younger generation. I think the Gen Zs, the millennials, the Alpha A's, they seem to be more responsible. They seem to be more, ethically, sustainably conscious. They don't really require us to tell them. In fact, the other day when I met someone, and one of my friends had a conversation with her daughter, and she was trying to advise her. The daughter told the mother, "Mama, just leave us alone. You don't need to tell us. Your generation has messed up the planet enough, and let us find a way to now restore it back." So I think it's definitely reverse mentoring. We need to learn from the young. We need to hold hands together and see how we can work it out and admit that we have made mistakes, but we also need to take aggressive steps to ensure a sustainable future for all of us. Yeah.
Carl, also your closing comments. COP28, there's a lot that, of course, is going on. What are your hopes and expectations for outcomes from this engagement?
Less on the role of government, but more on the role of individuals. What do we need to unlearn and what do we need to learn? And I'll give an example of a UAE-based company called the Waste Lab, who's focusing on composting. And can we start picking up the habit of composting? And what will be the implication for food security if we do that small step in every home in the UAE, for example? So really, it's about behavior change.
Of course, personal development, starts with the person, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And Radu, I just want to leave it with you, of course, our host for today, for your final closing comments to wrap up the session.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for attending. It was a very interesting conversation, and I'm extremely glad, representing Mashreq, to see that many of the themes which have been touched upon, or the things that have been mentioned by both Samira and Carl, actually resonate with Mashreq and exist in our day-to-day actions. For example, Samira, you were speaking about inclusion, and inclusion not only at the child level, but at the country level. And this is one of the things that Mashreq is really fond of, and we are launching financial inclusion proposition in Pakistan and Egypt as an example. You also spoke about diversification and educating the people how to use their budget. And this is, again, something that we are promoting, like the famous 50-30-20 rule, how to spend 50% of your money, exactly. 30% and 20%. Yeah. And on the saving part, we are also coming with specific offers to help people start to invest. Because when you're talking about investment, it's a general misconception you need to have a lot of money to invest. But it's not true. you can start investing on our platform with $100. And you can even select the theme on which you are fond. It might be environment, it might be technology, whatever. We are having thematic investment. And even more than this, you can create an investment habit. Yeah, you can save each and every month, for example, $100 in an investment fund which is addressing technology, for example. So again, a lot of the things which I appreciate these concepts exist in our real life. And then going to Carl, I really loved when you're talking about partnership and technology and gamification. And one very good example, we are having a partnership with Analytica, and we are giving you an estimation of your carbon footprint. Yeah, it's not a perfect calculation, but it's an estimation, and it's an estimation which triggers a conversation. You know, I'm one of the first user of this, and I saw, for example, last month that one of my biggest footprint generator was the bill for my daughter's school. And initially I said, look, this is something wrong here. It cannot be. But then I realized it might be, because in the end, the school is using a lot of resources and a lot of things to educate our lucky kids. And last but not least, keeping the conversation going, Carl. I think this is very, very important, and keeping the conversation going around financials and going around environment. And this would be the last reference I will make to Mashreq. We just launched our cards, which are done by reusable materials. But not only this, the cards are having a new theme, which is related to the endangered species in UAE. So if you are looking at our cards for various segments, you are going to see some example of animals, of plants which are threatened. And we are helping the conversation going around simply by the design that you are using for our cards. So I think both Samira and Carl, you came with great insights. I'm happy that we've been the host. I'm happy to see that many of the concepts that you are mentioning are alive in Mashreq, and I would definitely love to continue the conversation offline with both of you to see how we can partner for the future. And last comment about COP 2028. As I mentioned, I've been there in a panel. I took my daughter to join me and to have a feeling, and I had the revelation, you know, because she's young and all the people in there are young, but the depth on which they are touched by these subjects and how passionate they are about it, it's exactly what you are saying, Samira. It's a reverse learning that we have to do. So it was a pleasure to host you guys.
Likewise, Radu, and thanks for sharing insights. It's great to see we are all in sync. Beautiful.
Just to echo Radu, of course, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Samira, for your great insights and intelligence being shared today. We appreciate your time. And of course, Radu, for hosting this session. And of course, those who have joined us across LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and here on Zoom, thank you for your time as well. Please feel free to follow our special guest speakers on social media to keep up with the progress that's being made, and of course, what the way forward is, the pathway forward. And of course, on Mashreq, where we will be posting content harvested from this session, of course, to share throughout everyone's network. But thank you very much, everyone, for your time. We appreciate it. We look forward to having you back on the series down the line in the future.